What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Schmovie. This is episode number 427. My name is Steve, one of the co-hosts of the show, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron.
And Lonnie, weird and scrawny, has had bad dreams, so he cries to mommy.
That's John, guys.
John, yes.
That's John, guys. If you listen, you know that's the order it goes in, so you always have that anticipation of how's John going to choose a quote from a movie.
Yeah.
Or am I not going to? And I love that there was one week where I was allowed not to and no one said anything. And it's like, that's the way it ought to be. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't. It's like looking out the window and seeing Michael Myers standing there, and then you look away and then you look back and he's gone. It's like, that's the way my opening quotes are.
Yeah, it's the same thing, John.
Exact same thing. No, that's what scholars compare it to.
Or he'll just get closer. That's the weirder one. Where he's like, "Oh shit, where's it? Oh no!"
You jump out of order and you would do it before Ronald says his name.
Right. Oh,
that's what it is.
Yeah.
There was a time where I feel like we were either incapable of getting it timed right on without tripping on each other, or where we were trying to make it different every time or something. I don't know. I feel like there's different eras of our opening greetings.
It might be the improvement of Zoom. Like I feel like Zoom's gotten so much better.
Sure.
Like I'm looking at you guys in this video. It's like,
don't jinx us.
Looks great.
Yeah.
It might be that our lighting has gotten better or something, but you never know. Ronald, did you freeze?
Got him.
I did another funny.
So, guys, we've made it. I mean, we're going to start this. Let's see if we can get through this. But we've made it to our final Halloween Watch 'Em All episode. Yes. These have been, what is it? This is the fourth one?
Fourth one.
I mean, just feels right. Let's round it out at this first week of October as we get into spooky season. As always, we planned this out perfectly.
Yeah.
Planned from the start, clearly. And, that's just how we do things. Very profesh. Yes. And we're going to clean it up nice and neat here with this final episode.
What's going to be funny is in a few weeks when we're like, what can we do for our Halloween episode?
What we've been doing for 3.5 months.
Right.
So, yeah, we're gonna go through the last 3 films that we have to talk about, which is the most recent trilogy, the Blumhouse reboot, whatever. What's the other term? What requels? All those, the David Gordon Green trilogy that brought back Jamie Lee as Laurie, and it kind of came out. What was the year of the first one? You guys have it written down?
2018.
18, just before, and kind of blew up at the box office. This one came out, and Blumhouse has had a great run even prior to this movie coming out, but this is kind of one of those legacy IPs that they get a hold of, and they've in more recent history had less success with, but this is kind of what started them on that path. And they were like, we can do that. Like, we can do that to The Exorcist as well. Mm-hmm. And that's what didn't work out so well. And even with the same director.
Yeah.
But yeah, when in 2018, when Halloween comes out, the David Gordon Green version, everybody's excited. Jamie Lee's back. A lot of the marketing for the film was really good. The trailer was really good. And it was just like a kind of a very exciting time for arguably one of the top 3 horror franchises to kind of come back with a new film in a modern age and to bring back like an icon again, but in a different way, like a way that, seems to be directly connected off of the first 2 films. Was an interesting take. And what's exciting mostly to me is like Danny McBride co-wrote this movie.
Right.
It's like, what? You read the billing and you're like, what?
It's definitely one of the more interesting things about it, the whole series, is to think about the McBride of it all. But it's like, I was thinking about it, it's like, I totally love that career for him. I mean, I love that he's gotten a chance to do something like this. And I love that he's kind of buddies with David Gordon Green, and it allowed this to happen this way. Because I think that some of the best, and I mean, maybe you could say the worst too, but like the best and the worst things about the 3 movies we're going to talk about in this episode, it feels like it's rooted in someone's actual aesthetic. Most of it, there's a little bit of like what you'd call fan service or whatever. Yeah. But I think that a lot of it does feel like someone's attempt at this point in watching these films. These are the 11th, 12th, and 13th Halloween films that we've watched for this podcast. And so at this point, it's like, I'm sort of over the whole idea that they're going to be different when a different team comes in and takes on the material. So it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be the end all be all. At this point, we can all agree the first one is still the end all be all. I mean, for the most part, most people agree the first one is
Yeah.
still the best one.
Yeah.
Once you're doing this many movies and we all agree the first one's the best one, it's kind of like, well, what is this team going to do? And I sort of like that. I think we can credit Danny McBride and his kind of just story sense for some of the again the weaknesses and the strengths of this. I think come from someone who's actually trying to do their take, and that's better than something anonymous.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, and that's something that, even with Rough House Pictures, like that's the production company that he runs, or that he has with David Gordon Green and Jody Hill. Like if you look down the kind of things that they've made, it's kind of all over the place. It's like they've made a lot of comedies, but they've also made some very serious dramas and coming of age films and horror films, and they've obviously kind of like the idea of getting their hands into different kinds of movies, which is exciting because most people associate Danny McBride with just being a super funny person, and he is. And he's had some of the better comedy series of recent history, that we've loved. As a podcast, we talked about him quite a bit.
Comedies with like dramatic stakes,
for
and
sure,
like epic storytelling techniques,
Yeah.
Even for the silliest stuff. So yeah, he's a good storyteller.
So it's really exciting to see, things like that happen when you get that variety of creativity and filmmakers and artists, and you just throw that all on top of, like, again, one of the top 3, 4, I don't know, what depends where it falls for you, horror franchises ever. And you're like, what does that look like? And, to start things in 2018, it looks like, David Gordon Green's Halloween. Where do you guys, going back and checking this out, like, where do you guys, I guess maybe, do you remember what you felt about it when it came out versus your rewatch of it, for this episode, or where do you fall on this one?
Well, I was a big fan of it when it came out. This time it takes an atomic shit on the Rob Zombie ones. Like I do not like. I realized after we finished it, I don't fuck with the Rob Zombie ones. Like, and it makes me appreciate the artistry of the David Gordon Green one. There's something about it that feels like it's measured. Like John was saying, even if you don't like the choices were made, and it wasn't like we're just gonna put a Rob Zombie sort of aesthetic into something. Like I kind of like that it feels familiar. Like I think that's what I'm trying to get at. Something about the David Gordon Green trilogy feels so familiar. Like they still do the suburban thing. It still feels like it's like in the space, still feels dangerous. The cues feel very familiar. The deaths are just like brutal, but like real, like a strong person could do this. You know what I mean? Like, it's like,
well, yeah, he's a guy in this one. I mean, they
Yeah.
emphasize at least in the first one, the emphasis is on like he's aged too.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
old man Michael. So in that sense, yeah, he's a more relatable version of him. And I like there's so much about this movie that works. And when you said what you said, Ronald, about it taking an atomic shit on the zombie movies, even not just comparing it to the zombie movies, I would say just after watching the entire progression of this series, to sit down and watch 3 essentially competently made movies, like there's definitely issues with as the movies go on, particularly I think in the second one where the filmmaking for me kind of falls apart in some places, but just in general to see decent acting and like well-intentioned writing and interesting directing, and it's not like interesting directing the way that Rob Zombie did it, which is an aesthetic, but it's like that white trash aesthetic that was like he's like pushing something excessive. You said measured, Ronald. I don't know, it's an interesting word to use, but it's the right word in a sense when you look at what David Gordon Green brings to this world, which is a kind of thoughtfulness. And again, I guess I'm going to eventually just stop saying, and some things just don't work, because these movies have so many things that like work up against things that don't quite work. And I think the first one might have the best overall average of stuff that works, but it still has moments where it kind of hits a clunky spot. But so much of that comes from like trying to inject a real moment of character, and some of that stuff can be awkward, and some of it can be a little self-satisfied, or you can be like, this is a little gimmicky, but it's never cheap and lazy and stupid the way some of these movies we've been watching
Yeah.
from this series have been. So in that sense, I think that I liked, and it's funny, Steve, that you were saying like what year did it come out? Because to me, I can always remember this movie as 2018 because that's sort of what people call it, is Halloween 2018.
Sure.
Because
Yeah,
you have to
yeah.
differentiate it from Rob Zombie's Halloween and the
78.
OG Halloween.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting new thing because this isn't the first time it's been done in this series, but let's link back to a certain point in the continuity. And this
like
one
that.
very much positions itself in the continuity as the first movie's the only thing that happened. All the other ones are gone from the continuity. And, there's even a character, the sort of stoner guy, Dave, who I like the way that he's a better guy. Like, he's a decent kid. He's a solid kid, after all. He actually does try to go back and save his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Stupidly. Julian tries to warn him. Julian's like, get out of here. He's going to kill you. But I like that Dave doesn't, because that gives Dave the perfect excuse to run. But I like when they're walking and he's kind of being a little insensitive about it, maybe. But he makes a good point. That's like, this is like a few people that Michael Myers killed 40 years ago. Why are people still hung up on this? And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it was a good way to position the viewer in what this movie's doing, which is saying, let's go back to it's, what happened, and it wasn't based on any brother sister thing. Laurie Strode and Michael Myers aren't related. It's just she was the girl who happened to come to the house he was in, and whatever, he fixated on her.
Right.
He got recaptured. He's been chained up in this place. Like,
They've like imprinted on one another. Yeah.
right, but did they? And I think that the way this movie deals with that question of like, why are their paths intersecting? And I really enjoy that it's the actions of other characters that make sure it's going to happen, that these two characters intersect more so than that Michael Myers is like got this connection. I don't know. I think a lot of that stuff just feels like they really thought it out before they did it. And I think, again, it hit some bumps in the road, but like watching this movie, I almost started off thinking, I don't think I'm going to like this as much as I did the last time. And I kept liking it and going, I think I like this. And I think certain things I liked better this time. And certain things maybe I didn't like as well. But I think in general, I was more on board with Laurie's personification of this character, or Jimmy Lee Curtis's personification of Laurie. I think I was more on board for it from the start this time. I saw a lot more humor and life in the character, and she seemed less drab and gloomy to me, which was what that was the impression I've been walking around with in my head all this time, is that she's pretty drab in these movies. But she's got some pretty fun moments.
Yeah.
So I don't know, was there anything that surprised you, Steve? Like, I know that you generally liked it before. It wasn't that long ago that we watched it. Have you watched this movie a bunch of times or anything?
I think I've watched a couple times since. I mean, I think I may have rewatched it maybe when Kills or Ends came out, just to kind of make sure I kind of kept that through line there. But yeah, I remember, I would say I remember liking this, not loving, but liking it enough. I think, when we get into our rankings, it's like somewhere in the middle for me. But I do remember really liking pieces of it. I did really like a lot of what Ronald was kind of getting at, like just the vibe of the town. I liked the vibe of all the characters that we met, like, Karen's husband and the kids and her friends, and, the settings around the teens. I liked all that stuff. And I think the big thing for me was that I thought the ending was awesome. That's the takeaway. Like, I feel like for the whole movie to be like good, better than good, like the ending I thought was very good. And it was like a moment I remember leaving the theater where like, that was a very good ending. Like, and there's two more movies.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when like the concern or doubt crept into my mind.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because you're like, oh, cool, that was good, and they're making more awesome. But then you're like, but that felt like a good ending.
Yeah, that felt real good.
And especially, it's like, how many more steps do we need to keep bringing this thing back around when you can give us a moment of finality that doesn't feel too final? Like, I like the way that ending is. He's kind of there in the flames, and then he's not there, and then you see it ends on them.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I kind of agree with you. The first one has a great ending. Like, I was unexpectedly back into it when I was watching it, because Nikki kind of came through and she got wrapped up into the ending and was watching it. And then I found myself going, "Oh, watch this! Oh, this is awesome!" Like, I found myself doing that thing of like,
you're like repping it to
like,
her. Yeah.
But also, but feeling more pumped than I realized I felt. Like going, because I do like I think now that I've seen it a few times and I'm not surprised by it, or I'm not like disappointed by anything that doesn't go the way I thought.
Yeah.
I think I'm more interested in the things they do nail, and I think I love the way they nail the sort of reversal, like the thing that's behind me, my image here.
Yeah.
This moment with Laurie is like that's the spirit of this movie, you know. And like there's
Totally.
a part where Laurie falls off the balcony and Michael looks over and she's there, and then he looks away and looks back and she's gone.
Gone.
It's
Yeah,
like
man.
that might be for some people fan service, whatever, but I feel like it's the perfect inversion of what we've seen
Yeah.
before. And that's what I mean about the thoughtfulness of what David Gordon Green and his writers came up with, which is just like they came up with a lot of like, oh, you know, one's quite done this before, or wouldn't it be neat to do this, or
Yeah.
yeah, even the research I've done on the versions of the movies that they haven't done. There's a lot of things that were in pitches over the years that will somehow percolate back up, and so I think there's a lot of like interest in just trying to figure out like what are the unplumbed depths of this series that has had so many entries in it. And I think
Yeah.
that one of the ones that never quite got, they kind of did it in H2O, but it never quite got nailed, was that idea that like now Laurie is just as scary as
Yeah.
Michael is, just as formidable. And I love the moment, Judy Greer's little fake out moment where she pretends that she's crying and then
Oh, I love it.
she draws him out. Like I liked that before. I was practically pumping my fist when I was watching
know.
it this time.
I remember feeling that way in the theater, like when you realize, oh, like they're all working together. And
Yeah.
this is a setup, and like I don't know that does have a like a fuck yeah moment in the
Yeah.
movie, like when you're watching it happen, and like they drop it on him, and
Oh
he's
God, so
trapped.
good.
Like that was awesome. That was really good.
He's never dealt with a home court advantage. Like
Right, right. Someone
it
who
was
is that prepared, kind of
right.
thing.
And
You
all
know,
he needs,
no,
sorry,
you go ahead.
all he needs is a knife. That's his home court advantage. But
Right.
they're like, I can account for that. Bullets can kill. Bullets beat knife every time. It doesn't matter how many times, and they can outsmart. Oh, I love the booby traps. It was so. It was half Home Alone, half.
Well, it was like Panic Room meets Home Alone meets
Yeah.
some survivalist shit. Well, I was just going to say the original ending was he's like out on the lawn. Judy Greer, Karen comes out and shoots him with a crossbow, and it like
Oh,
gets him, and then he leaves, like walks off into the woods and like disappears into the woods while like so it's like there was less for Allison to do, and there was less of a resolution to it, and the test audiences were like, eh.
Yeah.
And then they I think it was totally like they rewrote and reshot the last chunk of the movie to spread out do what we just said, to kind of give everybody like this part in the climax and to make it more final. And it's so interesting that what they came up with was so much better. Like the house burning down around him was an incredible.
Yeah.
Again, it's like whatever you think of the logic of it, I think just the finality of it and the feeling of like there's something about, I don't know, there's a potency to just the idea that Laurie would have that contingency plan in place,
Oh,
And I remember the first time thinking they didn't take as much advantage of the kind of trap house as they could have.
yeah.
But this time I was like, no, I think they did enough. There were some creepy scenes of her walking through the house, like with the mannequins and all that stuff. I mean, some of that stuff was a little silly. Why would you have creepy mannequins in your house if you were afraid of, spotting somebody?
Right.
But I think that like they did enough with the idea that the house was kind of one big trap.
Yeah.
What were you about to say, Ronald?
Shit. I don't remember.
You're gonna say, "Look at my nice new denim shirt."
Yeah, Denim. Have you heard the song Venom by Eminem? Listen to it.
Yeah.
Venom. Did you never mind. Haley has a kid now, man. Like
I saw that video, the
who
temporary
wrote
video.
it? Yeah.
Well, isn't Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love's daughter, Frances Bean, isn't she married to Tony Hawk's son?
Right.
That's like one of those like on Game of
royalty.
Thrones. That would be like two families that came together. To make a really big difference. Someone mentioned that specifically for Gen Xers. That's like that's how our king or queen will be born. Will be.
Yeah.
It's like. So I don't know. Like it sounds like we all enjoyed aspects of this movie for sure. But we've also sort of alluded to weaknesses that kind of plague it. When you talk about it just being good, Steve, what are some elements that don't quite work for you?
I don't know. I just feel like there's not as much of like an energy to it. Like as much as I praise like the vibe of it, to feel like Haddonfield and it feels like autumn or fall. Or it's got that vibe that I really love in all these movies. We talk about it, and specifically, like I remember bringing it up in like 4 and 5. She did a really great job with that. Um, I don't know. Beyond that, I felt like it lacked like an energy to like it's got that awesome like opening sequence, like at the insane asylum, and like there's all these really great set pieces that are good on their own, but like this like a connective tissue to me that just didn't like propel the movie as much. Like as excited as I was to see it, I just remember in the theater
Hmm.
just feeling like, okay, that was better than probably most of the Halloween films of the 13 of them, or it's in that top middle half. But like for it being like a big Blumhouse thing and Jamie Lee's back, like I don't know, some part of me just expected like a stronger energy to it
I
that
think you're right.
I felt was
Oh
missing.
man, I agree. I
I
agree.
think you nailed it. It felt to me almost like a television show. And about halfway into this movie, I thought, oh, I'm going to, instead of watching a trilogy of movies, I'm going to pretend I'm watching a 6 episode miniseries. And it was a lot better. I mean, it just felt like, because that pace, that tone, that kind of hangout tone, it's almost episodic.
Yeah.
Even within the movies, they have these kind of episodic things going on. But I do think within that, there's these moments of sophistication that may have been something they found in the edit, or may have been something that was in the script. I don't know. But like, I do think there's moments of really good filmmaking and really interesting, cool visual choices, and just things that again feel bold and interesting compared to some of the stuff that we've seen before, where it feels like that stuff was rather indifferent. But no, I think you're right. I think that like it might be mostly an energy thing, even if it also may be a little bit of a plot logic thing.
Yeah,
um
yeah, that
in
too.
some places. But like for instance, the scene at the asylum at the beginning, and all the inmates are screaming and stuff. Like, I like how surreal and bizarre that moment
Totally.
was. And the podcasting team didn't bother me as much this time as they did before. However, I still think it's ridiculous that they had a budget for the interview. That's just hilarious. Like, what podcasters are walking around with $8,000 in an envelope? Um, but no, I thought those and that scene at the gas station with them, I liked the way that went,
That's
the way
good.
that so all of that was pretty solid. I remember thinking that before, that this movie had like a strong start, and then there's a point where you just hit a scene where it's not as good, and then it gets back to it's pretty good, and then a scene where it's not as good, and I don't know, like all that stuff is there's not like a single plot thread that is like perfect from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And that's where I do think some of the kind of melodrama of Jamie Lee Curtis's performance and character is like, I do wish we could have had a more I don't know, fun version of Laurie. I think that might have been the energy solution that you're talking about, Steve. Would be if it weren't such a depressing movie in
Yeah.
a lot of
Right.
ways.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. There's like a thing. It doesn't feel quite as unhinged. Like I think when I think about like sort of the past films that we saw, so especially the first couple, I do like that, like there's a lack of self-awareness. Like this is a new thing that's happening. So you're not trying to mimic an old thing, right?
Sure.
Like
Right.
you're just like in the moment. I also love unpolished actors where they
Hmm.
just have a person like the energy that I wanted for the whole Halloween movie. Remember when they went to the bar and there was that old black man? He's like, "Yeah, you gonna have to feel you." It it was like it was like that
Was he in
rough,
the first? Was he in the first one, or
or
was
maybe
he
the
the
second
second
one.
one? But I know the
It's
bartender you're
that
I think
talking
it's
it was the
about.
that
second one.
thing that Danny McBride does in all of his other stuff, where it's like polished actors, unpolished actors kind of swarming around each other,
Yeah.
and unhinged reactions to being killed. Like
Yeah.
I liked when somebody got stabbed and it like swirl around a little too much or fall weird and jerk around. Like that stuff was missing, man. And some of it is like maybe you're too cool for this shit. And there's like a yes and thing to it that people don't have anymore. Like it's like 90% of the actors that are active right now don't have that in them.
Hmm.
It's a thing that even The Rock has. Like I know it sounds stupid, but like you're okay with being an ass. Like it's like I can fall down, I can hurt myself, I can be an asshole, I
Right.
can look stupid. I can look stupid in a situation. I love that stuff. And death. Somebody figured out in the 70s that death is not a pretty looking thing. It can be kind of, I guess it can be kind of goofy too. Like if you're not considering being embarrassed. You're like screaming for your life as a person's coming towards you with a knife.
Or they're just lifting you up and banging you on the wall. Like when he
Yeah.
bangs so many people to death on things, and that poor podcaster guy, the House of the Dragon guy,
Yeah.
the Lannister. The Aaron is the character's name in this. Like he gets like bloodied to a pulp, like on the door of the stall that the woman podcaster is in. I just thought that was a really great use of the space, and I've always, in my head thought that kind of someone in a small space just taking you and just banging you around, and like once they've got you once you've gone bang bang, you're now kind of disoriented, so now they can just do it until
You
you're
do whatever.
limp. So but I mean the brutality of that. I've heard some people criticize that they don't think the Michael in this series is the same Michael you get in the earlier one, where he's a little more elegant or whatever with it, but I feel like I sort of buy the idea that he's angry and he's like there's something amped up about him in these movies, but particularly in the second one, it feels like he's pissed off. And for me, that's something that kind of works about that movie. But in the first movie, it's more about him just seeing him as kind of an old man, even though you don't really see his face, and realizing that he's just as old as he's actually a little older than Laurie. So no, there's an interesting thing going on there with like him being old and her being old, and I think that kind of helps that first movie feel like there's something scary about him, even though we do see that he's more just a guy than ever as far as the way he moves and the way he looks. What do you think of the sort of aged mask? I think as a conceit, it's a neat idea that the mask looks kind of aged in that, like almost like it's wrinkled. But I feel like they may have overdone it a little bit. Like I think it might have looked cooler to me if it was like actually like an old cracked rubber mask, rather than like it looks like the mask itself has like like literally aged, like wrinkled like a person.
There's a point where is it in the first one where they're like kicking him around, or is it the second one?
That's the second one.
Okay. Damn it. There's a point where he puts on the mask and it's like it's that movie magic thing where he puts it on his face and then it's like and then it like fits on his face the right way. You know what I'm talking about, Steve? Like he's down on the ground. He puts it on his face, and it's like loosey goosey as shit. And then when he gets up, it's like
right. It's like, perfect.
Fit it to his eyes, like perfectly there, so it looks like nothing's behind. I love the nothing behind the mask look.
No, they do a good job of that in all three of these. The fact that he's basically a no-eyed.
Yeah,
he's got like shadow eyes. Yeah,
shadow eyes. I'm a big fan of that. And then he just says, fuck all essential workers. And he's killing nurses. He's killing firefighters, man, doctors. He's killing them all. He's like, screw these guys. We don't need these essential workers. Killed so many firemen. Like it was like, and then the view within the mask where he's like, within the helmet. Oh, yeah, that was so good.
Yeah, you mentioned the sort of relatable dad or realistic dad character. Toby Huss is Ray, the Judy Greer's husband, and he's so useless in the most friendly and like affable way, but he's just completely passive. And I feel like all the men in this, all the men and boys are either useless or passive, or evil. And I think that sort of like even Ray, who's a decent guy, and he's like trying to help. He goes out there, he's holding the gun, but he's not really like wielding it the way he ought to. He's just kind of being too friendly. And earlier he's like in there yo-yoing, like while it's just like I love the way that character is almost too silly to be, but he seems so much like a real person might be in that situation. Just totally ill-equipped. But I also thought that I don't know, just generally the family dynamics. I think that there was something kind of good about that. I think that it's like I said, it gets a little melodramatic, but I liked the way that Laurie shows up to the dinner and kind of to be there for her granddaughter, and that the granddaughter's kind of using that as a wedge with her parents. I just thought that stuff was well done. Yeah. And there's a moment there where Laurie is talking about like relating to her granddaughter, and she's like, "Oh, I was in the honor society too," and she kind of gets choked up right when she says it, because it's like you almost hear her hearing herself sounding like a normal person. And then like realizing that she didn't get a chance to be a normal kid, and like getting I don't know, that moment really hit me. And I feel like there's little moments like that where Jamie Lee Curtis really is doing something with this character. So I think I don't know, it was too pleasurable to watch for the good reasons that I definitely, I was like, oh yeah, there's that part that didn't really work for me, or here's that the awkward conversation about sandwiches between the two cops. That's just like, this feels a little too much like Oh, this is like a Danny McBride dialogue scene. Um, and although that's one of those amateur actor things, Ronald. I think that one of the cops is like the makeup artist from the movie or something.
Yeah, we need more of that. We need more of that. But
But maybe not dialogue about sandwiches.
no. The second one is where I think we went a little left.
Well, let's do that. Does anybody have anything else they want to add to the conversation? I was just going to ask you guys what you think of Dr. Sartain. Do you think he works?
Forgettable.
No.
Forgettable.
Doesn't work as a story device, or do you think like just they could have done a better job of that same idea of like this guy seems like he might be the Loomis, but he's actually a different sort of beast?
Yeah, and or just maybe not even needing to be present at all.
Yeah,
honestly. It didn't work for me though. In general,
It could have been like his son or something. Like I would have liked if it would have been like, this is Loomis's son.
but where was Loomis getting busy in between those all original films?
Right, we don't know.
In
that was the thing they never really showed.
Heading.
Yeah, it's implied that he had some kind of a family at some time, but I don't remember now the details of any of that. No, I kind of agree. I think I like the way that his manipulation of the situation is what gets Michael out to. I mean, I like that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that Michael and Laurie are going to cross paths, and that Dr. Sartain is in the middle of that. But I just don't know if any of that's particularly well executed. Even the idea that he wants to put on the mask or whatever. Like, I think you could have a character do that, and it wouldn't be so crazy. I just feel like there's a little too much emphasis. It almost feels like they're flirting with Cult of Thorn stuff with him or something, where it's like a guy who worships Michael.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't quite work. It's like that whole. I do like Laurie meeting him though and going, "Oh, you're the new Loomis." But yeah. So Ronald, you were saying Halloween Kills goes a little left. You mean goes a little south, goes a little sideways?
It's like I don't know, man. Like, huh? Are you muted? I think.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my little thing. Sorry, I said by going left, you mean like you were going west, and now you're going south.
Yeah. It went all directions. It fucking was. I don't know, man. I think it's like the whole like I don't know, Tommy Doyle thing.
It's a weird thing because
Tommy Doyle, what the fuck?
Well, it's cool.
Are you Anthony Michael Hall? What?
I like that. I like the fact that they're bringing back another legacy character from the first one that has like importance and fan service, I guess. But like the whole, what's the word? Like the whole idea that the movie is focused on the town, basically the town's reaction to Michael, and they separate Laurie and Michael for the entire film. That piece is like what just completely doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I think the idea that like they don't even aren't on the screen together, and you don't really have a lot of Jamie Lee at all.
Well, you get a certain amount of her, but it's the weirdest.
Yeah, it's
like philosophical conversations happening with almost like it's narration or something like throughout the movie.
It's very weird.
And she's giving a lecture on the nature of evil while the movie's happening.
Right. And then and what she's kind of talking about is being like enacted by the town, it's like this other idea of evil and like how they're going to handle it. And, evil dies tonight or whatever. That all that stuff is so weird to me. Like,
it's so bad. That's just so bad.
I remember when we all watched it and we were like, this does not work, but I'll watch it again. It's like a Halloween movie that's just at least there. It's like it's fun or funny. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like there's a talking about vibe and energy. Like the whole thing is so off to me because the first one went so hard on like trying to get back into like what Halloween 78 felt like in a lot of ways, and had a great ending. And then the idea to like. I don't know. I'm trying to get it. Like the idea to make this a trilogy became very apparent here.
Yes.
Like I'm not sure what the take is here on the idea of a trilogy and where we go from a great ending from the 2018 one. And the idea to like, yeah, to put her in the hospital and to have her kind of being philosophical and like weird scenes with her, and there's some pretty cool kills in the movie,
Yeah.
so at least it follows its title, it's got some good kills, but like the like focusing it on the town dealing with Michael, or trying to deal with Michael more than our final girl. It's just weird. It feels literally like a spinning wheels thing. Like it's like, let's just do something for an hour and 45 to 2 hours that's like going to get us to the final movie.
That's good, right? They're going to be the middle chapter,
Yeah.
as though it was conceived as a middle chapter. I think that's I really agree with what you're saying about
Yeah.
the intention to make it a trilogy becomes apparent when this movie is like, and in some ways it's meant to be the kind of dark middle chapter where stuff goes bad,
Right.
like, and so in that sense they deliver on that. But I think that there is a weird kind of incomplete story. For as much as they do, it's kind of an incomplete story. That's why I was saying, when I thought of it like a miniseries, the idea that it would be the middle two episodes of a miniseries
Yeah, it's true.
feels more generous to it than it's a movie on its own. But I think that like the mass hysteria in the town is such a shit storyline.
Totally agree.
Like it's just not the part that I like of that, which I honestly think the idea that a bar full of people with an axe to grind with Michael Myers would go out into the night and try to take him on, that to me is great. Like a group of like a larger than average group than we see normally. That's like
Yeah.
a posse trying to get my.
But they
like,
kind
I
of
would
do
have
that in part 4 though.
But I mean,
they,
I would like to like hang out with a group of characters that we like, who are like part of this effort, and then like,
oh, gotcha.
I'm just saying that was a promising idea. But when it has to be like the whole town, it becomes like a South Park episode or a Simpsons episode or something, where people are actually chanting something and like waving pitchforks and torches in the streets. It's like,
Yeah.
it just was, and then like the way they're literally like chanting what they're chanting and just running around the hospital like a mob.
It's so weird.
That stuff was so badly handled. But as to what you're saying about kind of like what Michael is in this movie, like I do like the idea that he comes out of that burning house mad. I like that. In my head, I'm like, I like the idea that he's a little bit meaner in this one because he's mad. But I realize what my issue with the way Michael comes off in this movie is, and it applies to some of the kills. There are some good like stalking scenes that I like. But the sort of like when it's him versus a large group of people, it's not like you're watching a Halloween movie. It's like you're watching some gory video game that has like a Michael Myers skin that you can put on a character, and then he can just take out 12 characters, or he can take out, what it's like. It doesn't feel like when he takes out those first responders at the burning house, it becomes absurd. It becomes almost like a comedy sketch where they come up to him with a different tool, and then he turns it on the guy and kills him with it.
Yeah.
And it's like at the end when he gets back up from essentially being dead, and Jamie Lee Curtis is implying in the narration that like fear makes him powerful and makes him where he can't die. And it's like these movies have been trying to hit this whole idea that he's just a guy, and also he's like powered by fear. The way that he takes on the whole mob at that point just drives me nuts. Like
that was nuts.
It's so bad.
That's just so stupid that he could take. Like, if they had ended it with them all kicking him to a pulp, and then something distracts them, and then they look back and he's gone, that would have been a little cheap, but it would have been a much more effective use of that sort of mob plot line. But that whole thing with he's making us into monsters. I cannot believe they actually had a character say that. Like, it turns out we're the real monsters. And that whole thing with the other escaped convict, that is just, how could anyone think that man, that Harry Potter character, is Michael Myers? I mean, his physicality just doesn't seem right. It just that whole thing is so like
It's so off.
But like, did they think they were making a point? Like that's the part that's strange to picture, that Danny McBride had anything to do with writing it, because it feels so corny. But I guess
it's
his
weird,
instincts aren't always dead on. I don't know.
It feels like a real thing. Like, I feel like a mob would do something like that, especially now, man. But I feel like there's a subtle way that could have been handled without necessarily showing that. And I don't know, it felt like very like timely in the worst way possible. Like, I feel like there's a way that you could do this without being so like nail on the head, so literal.
Right.
Yeah, it's like no room for nuance. It's just like, oh, I think this is a commentary on how our current society and how people are about things. And it's like, man, that could have been a better version of that.
Yeah, that's what I was saying when you stepped away, Ronald. Is that like I think that there is a cool version of the town as a character kind of thing. Like that was to me a promising idea. And if you were going to say we're going to put Jamie Lee Curtis in a hospital bed for most of this movie, that would have been the answer. It would have been to fill the rest of the movie with a really cool ensemble. I just think that they don't do that. Like and I have to say some of the kills are so like that car full of characters that gets taken out at the park. It's just crazy to me to kill that many characters who seem like they're becoming kind of promising characters that you might like to follow, and to make it like they can't shoot straight, they can't figure anything out. I mean, I sort of get the joke of that, but it had a deflating effect for a set, for at least a minute to be like, oh, okay, we're not really following these characters. These characters are just done.
It was too much. It was too much in one scene. Like, it's too much bumbling. I mean, like, if you're gonna do that. And this is the first movie that has like John Wick implications. It's like I bang your arm, you go like this and shoot somebody by mistake,
Yeah.
or you're like aiming for one person, they duck down, and then another person gets. I've never seen so much like John Wicking in the middle of a horror film, and it just felt like you got to have one or the other. You got to have these people be like fairly efficient, but like don't miss you every once in a while, or like they can't be bumbling. Everybody can't make that many mistakes when they're faced with you. I mean, like I get that you grab them and kill them, but everybody's like, "Oh, my knife! I don't know how to hold a knife," and they try to stab you, and they stab their back, and they're like, "Oh!" It's like goofy how they hurt themselves. It's just.
I feel like the scene with Big John and Little John was somewhat credible when it comes to like the way they try to take him on. The way they try to protect their home, but not really. They're not like badasses with a lot of game. But I saw where some people were saying that those characters were like offensive stereotypes, but I don't know that I quite see it that way. They don't seem. I mean, they seem like interesting. I mean, I guess the fact that they're gay characters at all was sort of, in a movie where people pop up to get killed, it doesn't seem like they're treated particularly worse than anybody else. But to me, I liked them, and I liked their home, and I liked the fact that the Myers house in this movie, I don't know that we've seen it before in any of these movies, where it's just a well-decorated home that's being inhabited by people that just live there now. I mean, it's like, it's just a house that something happened in a long time ago. I thought that was that's one of those things that, like what I was saying before about, this hasn't quite been done this way before, and the fact that they use it when they're trying to scare the trick-or-treating kids, or the pranking, kids, but those little shits. But I don't know. It's just I think that was one of those wrinkles that worked for me. And every time that their house, like when they were going upstairs, I liked the way it was painted, these dark colors that felt like it was a cool style choice, and it made it look nice, but it also made it really creepy and shadowy and stuff. So I thought that was a nice. A nice addition, and I feel like there's a few vignettes like this in the movie that are just like a funny enough group of characters that you catch up with, and then they get killed, and then that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Or you keep coming back to them. I guess those guys are kind of in a lot of the movie in terms of time, but you kind of know when you meet them, they're probably not gonna make it.
Yeah, it tonally just feels very different than the first one. I can't figure out why they would stray so far from what felt like a really strong first script into this that doesn't feel like it has the same care like the first one had. It just doesn't feel as measured.
I don't know if you were here when we were talking about it, Ronald, as like a middle chapter. Like this is the one where Steve said, knowing that it was a trilogy, this is where it felt like, oh, this movie really operates as though there's going to be another one coming, rather than a movie that's trying to really feel complete. And I think it does try to give you the dark hour before the climax. Like Michael Myers is kind of ascendant at the end of this movie,
right?
But that almost makes the way he is in the beginning of the next movie doesn't really make sense, really.
So it doesn't connect.
It doesn't really link up that well. I'm trying to think if there's anything like a major event in this movie that's really worth speaking of, except for the death that happens at the end. How did you all feel with Karen. By the way, Karen, who I believe was named Karen. I don't know when Karen hit the scene as far as like the mass market of like we know what Karens are, right? But
Right.
like the first movie, I feel like she's an innocent Karen. It's like
Yeah.
she's just a Karen. But there's one time where Jamie Lee Curtis says to her like, your side window is wide open, Karen, and it's like, oh, there's a little bit of a Karen, but like
Yeah.
poor Karen. Did you think this was a an interesting way to end the movie, or do you think it's kind of a waste of a cool character? What did you think when you saw someone kill Judy Greer, which should be
Unjust,
illegal?
unjustified piece of shit move. I really did enjoy some of the backstory that she gave about how she was never able to quite be a kid, and I thought that stuff was so cool. Like it's a perspective that makes perfect sense. A person that's completely traumatized by the horrors of Michael Myers would also do the same thing to their kid and traumatize them the same way. Create this like super soldier essentially of a person who really is like a sleeper cell. Like you don't know that this innocent
Right.
person looking person has been like trained to kill, knows how to operate a gun, knows how to, camp out and do whatever. I love that. And then to have her like, tell this really cool story that connected us to um just the dynamic that they had, just to brutalize her in the end and just feels like a bargaining chip in between a second movie and a third movie. It feels like we got to raise the stakes. Let's kill her daughter as if she hasn't lost enough. Let's just kill the shit out of her daughter.
Right. Well,
Like,
it's like
Jesus
kill
Christ,
kill
man.
her daughter and kill all the legacy characters. Like if we care about Tommy
Boy.
Doyle or
Yeah.
the nurse, is it Marion,
Marion, yeah.
coming back, or even the way they bring in Robert Longstreet to play Lonnie.
Lonnie, yeah.
And it's like because we love him so much and he's such a great actor, that character has a little bit of soul. They even take Cameron, the piece of shit boyfriend from the first movie, and give him a little bit of soul in this movie.
Yeah,
Like,
they do.
I don't know. It's like it's full of these characters that I get the point of it is that Michael Myers is this unstoppable killing machine, but it does feel like there's a certain party that goes, but you also could be setting up characters that have value to them beyond just the pain of seeing
Yeah.
them,
100%.
match up against Michael.
Yeah.
And then
I
to
gotta say,
take out, then to take out Karen does have that angle of like, oh yeah, she. But I feel like as an ending, it kind of works as a punch.
I mean, it does.
I was gonna say, like, I think it actually works personally.
It felt like
Like,
kill.
not that I want to see her go because I love Judy Greer and
Yeah,
in
yeah.
general, but I feel like especially you see how this trilogy ends. I kind of feel like, and the way that the third film leverages Allison's kind of disconnect from anything after this event happens
Yeah.
at the end of Kills. I just feel like you know, the way it works out at the end of the first one and to seemingly work out like that again in this one, after she kind of lures him into the mob, and even though that doesn't go so well, she's like removed from that scene by the time that's all happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And she's moved on. And I don't know. I just feel like, to kind of cut to the Myers house, and we know that Michael basically took out that whole mob, and
Yeah.
she's back at this house and going through this weird vision of a young Michael. I just thought that was like a cool way to end the movie, where this is like it's like a point for you, a point for him, and it's like level set. What's the third movie look like?
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I just felt like that kind of thing, like you see like a really powerful character that kind of helped end the first one on a really high note, and she seemingly was about to help end this one on a high note, before he turns the table in the mob.
Mm-hmm.
So for it to turn around on her too, like in that successive sequence, I thought worked for me. I actually kind of like the way that ends. Especially, because it cuts to Laurie like looking out of the hotel or the hospital, and she has no clue what's gone on yet, because she's like wasted in the movie entirely. But
Yeah, such a weird choice, right? I mean, and it's like, and even though I like the conceit. It's similar to The Mask being aging. It's like I like some certain conceits, but not the execution. I like the conceit of her and Hawkins having this having
Yeah.
these chats, and kind of
Yeah.
seeing each other there. But it feels like such a weird add on to this movie. It doesn't, and again, it doesn't add a lot of value to to the to the story, and it really does feel like it's even more of a sidelining than in Halloween 2, if that's what it's a reference to. They overdid it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I really need to say about Halloween Kills. I guess not. I mean, I think the main thing is I don't really know. Steve, do you know? Did the plan of did they change the plan for Halloween Ends after Halloween Kills? Because it feels to
I
me
think
like
so.
they were setting up a different sort of maybe I even heard this somewhere that originally the plan was to have a movie that picked up right where this one left off.
That's right. They were supposed to be filmed back to back, like
Bad.
at the same time.
Oh.
And that changed apparently because of production issues or like a really tough production, and I think that caused them to kind of rework what Ends was. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we'll never really know if it would have been like particularly cool, I guess. But it is sort of like I do wonder, because I think that like if it had all been happening in one night, if that had been the conceit of the trilogy, would be that it was all in one night. I think that is a totally different
That's
thing
cool.
than what we get, which is like this 4 years later sort of thing, which I sort of buy some of what Laurie's doing, although I think it's weird that when he was locked away all those years, she was stressed and living in a house that she turned into a cage for him, basically. But then now that he's out there and he's killed her daughter, she's like, making cookies or whatever. It's just a strange way that they take that. But I do buy the idea that she would just say, "Fuck it, I just have to live my life."
Yeah.
It's just interesting that all happened off screen.
Yeah.
What do you think about the sort of kinder, gentler Laurie in at least the beginning of Halloween Ends, Ronald?
Well, I'm okay with it, I guess. I mean, I guess you couldn't go too crazy. Because the whole idea was like, if you let the idea of Michael Myers consume you, you're going to eventually go bonkers. So,
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
Well, I mean, I guess the big thing in part 3 or part in Halloween Ends is the presence of Corey, which seems to me like it's in its own way it's a nod to the original trilogy, where the third one takes a totally different route.
Yeah.
And there's some ways in which I almost feel like the movie they might have made that would have been all Corey is an interesting one to picture, but I guess they just know that would have pissed people off way too much if they didn't get Michael Myers. But I think that, like, even though I think there's some cool stuff between Corey and Michael Myers in this, especially when they're like teaming up to do a kill, but there's also some really weird stuff that I found interesting, but I know that is sort of like breaks the tone of the movies for some people, such as like having Corey like fight Michael Myers in the tunnel to get his mask from him or whatever. Like there's some kind of wacky moments that come from that. What do you think, Ronald, about the addition of a second killer, essentially?
It's strange, to be completely honest with you. I'm okay with the idea that it's a killer. This there's some parallels in their experiences in some way, but something about it just didn't feel right. But I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it. In fact, I actually like this one significantly more than the second, which didn't feel like that before. I think before I liked the second a lot more than the third, but going back, I just felt a lot more strongly about this idea, this kid that didn't hurt someone on purpose and is a pariah because of it. And then you have somebody who clearly kills people on purpose and has a legacy of fear and craziness. And they wind up ending up the same exact place, essentially, by
Right.
mistake. It's strange that way. And that to me feels like a smarter way of saying it. No, there was never a point at one in the movie where the kid was like, you know, me and Michael Myers are very similar. It's like there was no like killing joke sort of deal where like there was like a you and I are the same person, but on the different sides of the spectrum. It's just like I thought it was handled a lot better in terms of the messaging behind why somebody like him would be attracted to following in Michael Myers' footsteps.
Right. I mean, I think that it's an easy thing to say. Oh, what if we have a guy who essentially is like an acolyte of Michael Myers? But I
Yeah.
think the way that the shape it takes in the movie um, is is kind of interesting. Like,
Mm,
meaning that like it's not the sort of thing you would quite expect. He doesn't start off as like a kid who's into Michael Myers. He starts off as a kid who is um, having his own weird thing going on that puts him in a similar place to Michael
mm.
Myers. And even Laurie has this thing of sort of relating to him at first, um, in a strange way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Like she sort of thinks maybe he's damaged, like the whole the psycho and the freak show thing when the bullies say that, and she's like, which one of us is the psycho and which one is the freak show? Like
Yeah.
there is something. I like the way she goes from like relating to him to seeing that there's it's almost comical that Allison is so instantly attracted to Corey. But
Yeah.
I get that they're doing sort of a bad boy thing. It's almost like a movie like Wild at Heart or something, where two people sort of instantly have this fiery
Yeah.
attraction to each other.
She didn't have
Um,
any of that with anybody else in the entire franchise.
no,
But this guy's like,
I know.
oh, YB from Coraline. I really like the way you look.
Yeah, you sent that picture. He does look like that guy.
I was like, it's like sideways, like YB. Similar sad eyes. Yeah.
So, but I mean, like, I think that, yeah, I guess I kind of agree with you more or less, Ronald, that like Corey is a cool, like there's something cool about adding something to this to the series, even if I don't know that they quite knew what they were doing with it. And I know that for
Right,
some
right.
people that was a real break. I saw a lot of people at least that were very down on the presence of that character. But I don't know. For me, it was one of the more interesting things about the movie, and I particularly thought that opening scene and just what happens and the confusion that comes from it. I thought that was a really good, creepy turn of events that honestly I was not expecting that. Like I remember watching it the first time. I had no. You were sitting there wondering when Michael Myers was going to pop up and kill one of these characters. Uh,
Yeah.
so I thought that was a really when he accidentally kills the little boy and the way that it happens in the background. The mom hears him scream and then turns her head and says something, and then he falls behind her.
Right.
And the way they show it, I mean, it's pretty gruesome.
It's pretty bad.
Um, uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I thought that storyline was interesting, even down to the way the town kind of relates to him. And I guess I still don't quite. Yeah, it's definitely not justified in the movie why Allison. Um, would just I mean outside of like he's a cute boy or something, but he's not. I mean nothing no offense to the guy, but he's not that kind of like bad boy that you would think she would just fall for him instantly. But maybe she's already had this association with him as the guy who got a raw deal, and maybe she relates to that because there's a
Yeah.
lot of that. Like I relate to this guy,
I think
and then
that's it. Yeah.
and then like Laurie relates to him, and she kind of relates to Michael. So there's this weird like continual thing of like which character is sort of relating the most like Michael Myers at this moment. And I think Laurie sort of it's like if Laurie and Corey are competing to see who's the most like Michael Myers at the end of the movie, she wins.
For sure. Yeah.
But what did you think of the way he gets taken out? Did that feel satisfying, or did it feel? I guess it's kind of setting up this moment where Allison thinks Laurie killed him,
Yeah.
and
Killed
then
him. Yeah.
she kind of runs out and then just comes back. I guess that's a little bit dramatically silly, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
That
know.
almost feels like a reshoot or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Something doesn't. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Something doesn't like match up there in terms of the performance.
What do you think about that martial arts move that Allison did on like his arm? Like
oh yeah,
it was
Oh yeah. Yeah.
crazy. Like I don't think that most humans can do something quite. It was very like definite and permanent, like a superhero, something a superhero would do. Like Wonder Woman would have done that to somebody that was like a robot or so. I just was like, what the? Yeah, it was a little unrealistic, but I guess we're in a whole world of unrealistic. I don't know why I acted like that in particular was.
Well, I mean, I think that like it might be to do with what Steve and I were talking about. That there's like an energy level to the way she comes back in and then breaks his arm, and it just feels like what she just was like. What? How did she come? Like what? How did she know? And it just you can't quite figure out. Like we haven't seen that from her before, but also we didn't know she was there, and her timing was crazy good and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I do love how much Laurie like knifes him to the island in the kitchen and then brings the fridge down on him. I mean that scene was really fun for me, and I thought their fight in general in that last scene is a pretty solid. Person taking on a slasher. I have a thing for whenever that gets pulled off well, when someone just fights back, and it feels like a good moment, and that was a good fighting moment.
Yeah, I think like the whole point, like, or the whole setup of like her luring Corey back to the house, like with the faking the suicide, and even just how that plays out, and then her with Michael in the kitchen. Yeah, there's definitely like a nice just imagery and symbolism to like the whole kitchen and the knives, and this
Yeah.
is like the weapon of choice, and the cut to the throat and the wrist. Like there's very kind of, I don't know if it's poetic or it's just, but like it just felt like that was pretty good, I thought, or that works for the most part. But yeah, I missed a little what you guys were saying, but I feel like overall, like the Corey of it all, I was not a fan of that personally.
Okay.
Now you were kind of getting at that at the end, John. Like I felt like when I realized kind of, but and it's not even so much that idea is what bothers me. I think it's that idea in this third film of this trilogy is why it bothered me,
Yeah.
because of how it went from Halloween to Kills to Ends. It's that same feeling of like it did feel like they didn't have a real idea of like how it was going to step through the trilogy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because there's really no inclination or hint or vibe or anything around this film going in that direction after the second film itself went in a weird direction.
Yeah.
Like this is even more extreme, and it's like, yeah, you can credit them for going for something instead of being like very generic and formulaic or whatever. But that just made me even more kind of upset, I guess, around the feeling that it did feel like they changed this movie,
Mm.
after the kills didn't, whatever, it didn't film back to back, or it wasn't like taking place the night, right, the same night or anything like that. But yeah, I definitely like the movie overall more than Kills, I think, because of just the Laurie Strode being back in the mix more, and
Yeah.
even even like Andy and stuff like that. But the Corey thing was kind of weird to me. I do like the actor who plays him, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he really necessarily nothing to his fault, but just the idea that like there's a scene where he like successfully fights Michael in a sewer, like to get to get his mask.
That's just a weird
Like it's
moment.
so weird. It's
It's just
so weird to
weird.
me.
But even if
Yeah.
I love the sort of weirdness of Michael Myers has retreated to a sewer, and that because you always wonder where is he staying between movies or whatever, how is he getting by? But I feel like in this case they just don't explain it. It feels as though he goes on sabbatical or something after killing Karen at
Right.
the end of the last movie, and it just doesn't make sense. I do think
At
a
all.
a sequel that picks up later that night could have been cooler, and might have been more on par with like some kind of idea, like you're saying, like some kind of story that they were leading to. But I know they were talking about. I feel like they got this in their heads that they were doing, like in the second one. They clearly, you had alluded to this, Ronald. They thought they were doing social commentary, with the man's inhumanity to man. And I think that in this one, they thought they were commenting on like lockdown or like post like everybody's got trauma. Everyone in the town's got trauma.
Yeah.
And I think again that could have been a really cool element in Halloween Kills. The way that like the idea that everyone in Haddonfield would hate Michael Myers, I think is a cool idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that then when you do this version where it's like at the end of the movie they bring the town kind of back out, that stuff just felt sort of symbolic. Like I kind of like how completely they decimate Michael at the end. I think they lay it on a little thick with saying like, no, it's got to be done this way, and like the cowboy sheriff saying, yeah, we're going to let him do this. But I love the idea that they take him down to the dump and they grind him up. I mean, to me, that feels very much like something Laurie Strode would do. So even though that last scene is sort of grandiose and kind of corny in its own way, I like the way that they go for this. Yes. If we're looking at some sort of symbolic representation of everybody knowing, like, we all hate this guy. So I think that in some ways that's a satisfying ending. And I kind of like the, moment with her and Hawkins and the cutting to the shots that mirror the end of the first movie where you show empty shots of locations where Michael Myers has been, but now we know he's gone. I don't know. That was nice. Cool.
Yeah, I like it.
But yeah, I think that could have been at the end of a much more coherent movie, kind of to your point, Steve.
Yeah.
Well, I guess now is the little dirty business. Unless Ronald, you got anything else to say about Halloween Ends?
Well,
did it end?
I think it did. I mean, after a grinder, they made a ground beef out of him.
Yeah. They didn't show that. They cut the scene where she eats a sandwich made from ground Michael.
Well, a smash burger.
A slash burger. Come on, slash burgers. They should be popular this time of year. Well, I guess we can talk about how these movies fit in with the overall series by maybe talking about our rankings of the movies. But I also sent you guys a couple of little questions that we can get into with regards to just the opinions we might have, the history of this franchise, what we've developed. I was thinking about one thing that gets kind of left behind in some of the movies, but gets brought back in these movies, and so that's why I surveyed you guys on. It's the Greatest Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, a.k.a. rank the pumpkin-based opening credit sequences of all the Halloween films that use that device from 1, the best, to 7, the worst. And those would be, just in case people don't remember, the first one, there's just a jack-o'-lantern with the credits. And the second one, there's a pumpkin splitting to reveal a skull. In the third one, there's a pixelated pumpkin with like the logo of the film. Then they skip that for a movie. And then in the fifth one, there's where it's a weird opening, but then we realize we're inside a pumpkin while it's being carved. And then for the new movies, they brought it back. The reverse rotting pumpkin of Halloween 2018. The Halloween Kills, like gang of pumpkins that we keep see growing up. And then it ends in a weird spooky melty pumpkin silhouette. And then Halloween Ends, which is kind of odd. I can't tell if pumpkins are bursting through other pumpkins or kind of morphing through them, but they're kind of arriving as one is ending, the other one's showing up, and they're kind of replacing each other. So these are our rankings of the Greatest Pumpkin. I will go from the worst to the best. So let me see, what's the highest score here? Okay, the highest score with 19 points. Halloween 5, Inside a Pumpkin While It's Being Carved. That's our lowest rated pumpkin opening. The next lowest score is Season of the Witch, the pixelated pumpkin. I actually had that one kind of high. I liked the ingenuity of it. I remember when it came up, I was like, oh, that's cool that they're doing that. Then the next one, there's actually a tie with 14 points each. Halloween 2018's Reverse Rotting Pumpkin, and Halloween Ends' Pumpkins Busting Through Other Pumpkins, which are replacing them. Then we have, with 9 points, the original Halloween, OG Jack-O-Lantern. I think we all liked that one, but it's not the most dynamic once you start thinking about some of these creative options. Now, in third place, we have, let me make sure I've got this proper. The Halloween Kills. Slowly growing, or is that the third place, or that's actually second place? So this is actually second place. The slowly growing gang of pumpkins ending in a spooky melty pumpkin silhouette. That's our second favorite. And then our favorite, we all three put it at 1 with a perfect score of 3. The pumpkin splitting to reveal a skull from Halloween 2.
So good, man.
So good. Love it.
It's even kind of a messed up looking skull. That's the other thing that I think. Yeah. I never can quite confirm it, but it looks like a weird skull, which is even creepier. So yes. So this is the next survey that I gave you guys is That's My Loomis. This is to rank the versions of Loomis we get in the Halloween series from 1, the best, to 6, the worst. And Steve, I like your answer. were basically in order.
Yeah, the way you sent them were my choices in order, honestly.
For you, Loomis got worse as he went along,
Yeah.
as a concept and as a
Yes.
character. But Ronald and I had it a little different, so I guess we will go back through these in reverse order. So yes, with the worst one, we all agreed. We almost all agreed. Steve thought this was the second worst one, but Ronald and I put this one at worst. Rob Zombie's fuckhead Loomis,
Yeah.
total douchebag. The next one is New Loomis, Dr. Sartain. The next one, also tied with 10 points each, is Sweater Daddy Loomis from Halloween 6 and Burned and Bitter Loomis from Halloween 4. And then we have Batshit Manipulator Loomis from Halloween 5 coming in with 9 points at number 2. And another perfect score with 3 points. This seems like a gimme, though. Man on a Mission Loomis from Halloween and Halloween 2.
Yeah. I like frantic guy.
You like Frantic Guy that everyone kind of listens to when he comes to town? Yeah.
I enjoy it.
I do have affection. I like that Batshit Manipulator Loomis was ranked so highly, though, because I do think we all like some aspect of that. You know, some aspect of him, like, completely, like, using Jamie, using a child to set a trap for Michael and almost succeeding. You know, that's a pretty good showing for Loomis. And I think those are the only rankings that we actually successfully finished for this survey. So since we have been talking for a little while here, I guess I'll just move on to the big question, the one that we have to answer. I guess anytime we do a watch 'em all, we should do this. This is rank the Halloween films. Now, I don't have Ronald's ranking, and Steve, mine is kind of in order of best to worst. So why don't we all just sort of go down our individual rankings? Because I think in this case, it's more important that we just know individually what we think. I don't know, does anyone want to start with their individual
Sure.
rankings?
Let me make sure I have the I like assigned numbers to them.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. I wrote them down. Make sure I name the right ones. All right. So I'm going from best to worst.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Or worst to best. Actually, make it best to worst. I mean, make it worst to best.
Worst to best. Okay.
Yeah.
So worst to best. So my least favorite Halloween film is Halloween Resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would go Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. And then it would go Halloween Kills. And then it would go Halloween Ends. And then it would go Season of the Witch. And then it would go Halloween Curse of Michael Myers. And then it would go Rob Zombie's Halloween. And then it would go Halloween 2, Halloween 2018, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, Halloween H2O 20 years later, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, and my favorite would be Halloween 78.
All right. Ronald, do you want me to go next?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. My least favorite is Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Then it goes Rob Zombie's Halloween. That's Rob Zombie is the same. Just another name for Rob Zombie. And then Halloween Resurrection. And then Halloween 6. I don't remember if that's Curse. Is that Curse of Michael Myers? Yes,
Yeah.
That's Curse. And then Halloween Kills. And then Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Still don't know what he needed to get revenge for. But somewhere in there, someone slighted him. And then Halloween Ends. And then Halloween H2O. Halloween 2, the OG, not the Rob Zombie version. And then Halloween 2018. Halloween 4. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. And coming in at number 1, Halloween.
Okay.
What do you got?
All right.
What do you got?
All right. Halloween Resurrection, Halloween 2007, Halloween 2, Halloween Curse of Michael Myers, Spitui, Halloween Ends, Halloween 5 Revenge of Michael Myers, Season of the Witch, Halloween Kills, Halloween 4, Return of Michael Myers. Oh God, this paints me in a corner, doesn't it? Halloween H2O, Halloween 2, Halloween 2018, and the original Halloween is
Oh
number one.
wow.
Yeah, I like that ranking.
So 18 is really high.
Yeah, man.
Okay, cool.
18's like damn near.
So it's like it's a strong second place.
It hit me so hard the second time watch. I mean, I watched
Okay,
it.
good.
It was weird as I watched it a couple times.
Good.
Sometimes, some reason watching it this time, it just felt a lot more complete. It felt a lot more like, ambitious. It feels like they tried to keep the sense of it, but tweak some things. But again, there's like that wiliness that I really appreciate about like people being very unaware that like, hey, I'm in like a franchise and people die this specific way. I didn't like that part of it, but the movie was, I liked it. I liked it a lot.
That's good. No, that's
Yeah.
perfectly good. Where was it? It was in my top 5. I think Halloween.
Yeah,
Okay.
yours.
18.
It was number 5
It was
for
number
you.
5 for me. Yeah. Okay.
And it was number 4 for me.
Yeah. So it's a pretty strong showing.
I mean, there's kind of a middle of the packness that once you get down from the absolute golden classic, there's a lot of like good tries in there. You know what I mean? And I think that Halloween 2018 falls into the category with the good tries. That's why, and that's why I have Halloween Season of the Witch so high for me, is because I think that it's, for me, one of the most captivating of the tries.
Sure.
And I think that if you look at those paths not taken for the series, the idea that it could have been an anthology series of all the things they almost did but didn't do, a 3D version, a crossover with Hellraiser, all this kind of crazy stuff. The anthology route is probably the most tantalizing option, because that would have allowed for there to occasionally be a sequel to one of those anthology entries, but that each year you wouldn't be expecting, like, to break people of the habit of expecting Michael Myers every time. If they had succeeded in doing that, the series would be different. Now we wouldn't have seen so many reinventions of the same thing.
Yeah. I think that like my top 5 really feels like, it's basically alternating versions of Laurie Strode.
Yeah.
And then in between them, I have the Jamie Lloyds. Like I love the 4 and 5. Like, so I mean, that feels pretty good to me.
Yeah. No, it's funny how like not surprised I was, even though I was surprised when there was like this. There's extreme variation within our list, but there's also certain things that are kind of, again, assuming that a lot of these movies fall into the middle. There's a few that we really think are stinkers, and then there's a few that really are in the middle. And then there's a couple that are so mixed. Like, I really think the David Gordon Green films, for all 3 of us, depending on how we felt about them, they're all so mixed that we put them in different places on our lists, but we all, I don't know, find them to be like, even with the Rob Zombie movies, you sort of have this feeling that it's a reinvention of this thing. And so I really don't know what I would expect to see them do next, honestly. Like, I feel like, isn't there supposed to be a television show or something?
I was gonna say, yeah, it's what's happening everywhere. It's a TV show. Yeah. Like that'll be the interesting idea behind how they're gonna do that or what that looks like. But it could be cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Very much excited for that. Anything that brings Halloween or Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, kind of keep it in the mix. And even recently, Scream's had a resurgence. Like those are my favorite franchises. So anything that kind of keeps them relevant, I will always watch it.
So what do you think would be the way to do it at this point? At this point, we've just had the last version of Michael Myers that we saw on screen got ground up to kibble. It's hard to believe they would go back to any of these other movies and look for the continuity within them. You know what I mean? There's almost no chance that they're going to say, we're going to pick up the Rob Zombie version or whatever. So what do you think a total reboot or just a kind of reinvention overall? Because reboot would just be, that's telling the same story again, which we've now seen a couple times.
I don't know, man. I mean, it's a really tough. Maybe they go back to what was it? What was it called? Like the Curse of Thorn, or
that's what I mean. Like if there's nobody clamoring for that,
like that whole thing, like so one of those weird things. I don't know.
There's nobody clamoring for any particular thing. So all they really have is the mask. They don't have Loomis the actor anymore. I guess. I mean, again, they could totally recast everybody. That just feels like something
Yeah.
they've already done. So, what about you, Ronald? Do you have any feeling about what would be the way to do it?
Just small town it up. I mean, like if you just make it feel like
Like
s-
Haddonfield.
yeah, like
I,
Haddonfield. But some of the movies kind of missed the mark on that. So,
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm trying to think of something. You know the way From feels?
Yeah.
Like that. The way that it's like a small town, the sheriff, the people, and then
And
you
something's off.
you lost it up where you have a couple people show up that, like where the fuck did they come from? I thought that this was
I,
one island and people couldn't go on and off, and then it's like people keep appearing. I
yeah, I mean
like that.
the reality. I mean, I see no world. I mean, I honestly would be shocked if they do Halloween and say there's not going to be a Michael Myers,
Yeah.
Mm,
or there's not a Haddonfield, or there, even if it's a different approach and there's no Laurie Strode or there's no whatever, like the idea of the shape and the babysitter killer, like that, just that, like the idea born of a slasher. Like I don't know how you get away from that unless you go for a swing like you're talking, John, like Season of the Witch tried, or like they may have tried to do a little bit with ends. But there's got to be a slasher element, and or I would expect there to be a slasher element, and
Hmm.
just how you make it different. I mean, that's why somebody out there is hopefully making a lot of money, to do
yeah,
that, to come up with an idea
for
for
sure.
that. It was funny. I was reading an article just before we recorded. I wanted to mention this. I forgot when we were talking about Halloween 2018. But a lot of the usual suspects of like the horror scene that we love, like names had gone around like to direct that movie before it got to David Gordon Green, including like Adam Wingard, and more specifically was Mike Flanagan was like being courted to do that
Oh,
film, and he had already done Hush, and like
Right.
his whole thing of like I kind of bowed out because like what I would have made was Hush,
Yeah.
basically because Hush is basically a slasher movie that is like
mm,
my take on Halloween in some way, and like it was like he was talking like the it's good that I didn't do it because the only thing I wrote down was what if Loomis was a woman, and it was like and he was like, and that's when I knew I wasn't the right person for this movie, and he's like I would have added nothing to it, and that's like that's what you're looking for though, is like somebody's got to have an interesting take on like one piece of the puzzle to change to kind of make it interesting enough that you could still have a slasher, and and if it's Michael Myers, cool, but if it's not, it could still be Halloween, maybe, or
Hmm.
in the wake of Michael Myers, or there's a legend of, or like the lore around. There's
Was
got to be
was
a good take
Flanagan
on
a
it.
Bloomhouse guy? Was that like that? Where did like Oculus and Ouija whatever the prequel come out? Because I know that he was kind of considered a guy who you could bring in to a franchise,
Right.
And you mentioned Wingard too. Like, but both of those guys are those
Yeah.
names that come up a lot on those. I saw where Adam Wingard said that like he got a personal email
Carpenter,
from
right?
Carpenter, kind of
Yeah.
giving him the stamp of approval, and he said that even though it didn't quite work out, he still walked away going, Carpenter said, I vouch for this guy. And he
Right.
said that was as good as having made the movie in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that it's interesting that Flanagan had the presence of mind to say, I don't know that I have anything to bring to this that wouldn't be
Right.
something I've already done. And this needs more than that, like it needs more than what I would have to do. But I would be willing to bet that he could
Yeah, I mean,
do
they
something
did
pretty
they
cool.
did Oculus. Yeah, I mean, like they did Oculus. I think they did the Ouija film that he did. Um,
I'm just saying, I think that studio wise, he was a guy they trusted to sort of
for
come in
sure.
and have a take on the material, and that when
Yeah, totally agree.
he had to
Totally
kind of
agree.
pass for it to not be his.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's interesting that now he's taken over the Exorcist job from
Gordon
David
Green.
Gordon
Yeah,
Green, which
that's
is a little, I mean, again, I feel like maybe he's not the guy you hand your legacy trilogy to, but at the same time, I think it's it's still, I still like David Gordon Green. I'm still interested, particularly with his direction he does on the Danny McBride television series. He works on those, and usually a lot of those are just well made shows. So
yeah.
he does good work, but I don't know. Yeah, it's tough to know like what is his kind of capital when it comes to this kind of material now.
Yeah, you saying Flanagan and reminding me that he's taking over the Exorcist thing is like, the idea of him taking over one of the legacy things is really cool.
Hmm.
Like, I like love Doctor Sleep. I thought it was great. Like this is like a
I've
great.
never seen it.
Oh, Toronto, you got to watch it, man. It's so good.
You haven't seen Doctor Sleep?
Oh, it's so good.
I just,
I could have
I
sworn we
just,
talked about it on the show, but I guess it was just me and Steve.
Yeah, I think it was.
yeah, I just bought it so that I could watch it. Like
Yeah, you're gonna love it.
okay.
I'm very confident.
Ronald, if you want to pick
Aaron
it,
loves that
if you want to
book,
pick
and
it
she
as your
loves that
next
movie.
required viewing,
There you go.
you can make us
There
watch
you
it.
go.
Oh, that's
It's
a good
October.
one. It is. That's a good
Um,
one.
But yeah, I was always rooting, and he kind of always teased like wanting to be involved with any kind of attempt to reboot or whatever the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I would love to
Yeah.
see him do something with that character. But I'm sure he's got something awesome for extras. He doesn't miss, in my opinion. So
A motherfucker don't miss.
yeah, and then
Right. It's you kind of want him to do his own thing,
true.
Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, the most recent thing he just had the Life of Chuck premiere at Toronto that apparently blew the roof off the festival, and
yeah.
I think it won the audience award and like got picked up by Neon for release next year. It's supposed to be great.
Well, it's based
Uh,
on a Stephen King thing, but it's supposedly not like it's not a hard, dark story at all. It's supposed to be more uplifting. So I wonder if it's going to be like Shawshank
it's
Green
ish.
Mile kind of
That's what
vibes
everybody.
for people.
Yeah, that's what the comparisons were.
So
Yeah, love him.
Totally ready.
The idea that he could have done a Halloween is a cool idea, but Hush is also a great movie. So I'm happy that Hush exists, and if that was his take on Halloween, that's fine.
Yeah.
That works
Yeah.
too.
And also good take.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
well done. It works. Well, I mean, guys, we did it. 3.5, 4 months. I don't know what the math works out to be, but that's it. The Watch 'Em All of Halloween is done.
Yeah.
And now we wait for the series to come out so that we can do that and really
Oh
complete
yeah,
the Watch
of
'Em
course,
All.
yes.
Gotta watch 'em
I
all,
feel like
gotta
when we
watch
do
'em
a
all.
watch them all, we're beholden to talk about whatever the next one is. When they make a new thing.
Yeah, we got to complete it properly.
But Ronald, we were just talking about this. But what is your required viewing pick for next week?
It's gonna be Doctor Sleep.
There we go.
Oh, I just incepted
Let's
that.
do it. You just
Yeah,
made it
because
happen. John.
I haven't seen it. I'm really excited about it. I literally just bought it for like
I'm really
$6.
excited to watch it again. I loved this film.
Is this the theatrical or the super edit or whatever?
Which one did you buy?
Oh, that's a good question. I gotta check. I'll check the 4K and I'll send you guys a screenshot. Speaking of which, man, Nightmare on Elm Street remaster coming out this month. God, I can't wait to see what that looks like.
Yeah,
It's like
me too.
something old, something new. I can't wait to see Doctor. Aaron loves Doctor Sleep. I've said it like 3 times, but
Yeah.
she talks about it.
Is she a big Shining fan too? Because I kind of feel like a lot of people, I don't know, like Shining seems like one of those movies you shouldn't make a sequel to, and then Mike Flanagan came along and did about as good of a job as I think somebody could do with making a sequel to The Shining.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Cool. All right. Well, that'll be back to form next week with a new episode talking current releases and obviously Doctor Sleep. So if you haven't watched that or want to watch it again with us, that's an invitation for next week's episode. Movieshmovie.com is the website. You can go there to subscribe if you're not already subscribed, or listen right on the page if you'd like to just do that on the web browser. You can also go to youtube.com/movieshmovie podcast and subscribe to the podcast in audio or video form there. Take your choice. And if you do any of the stuff I just said, it would be really appreciated. And even better if you could leave a review, a rating, a thumbs up, anything like that for some feedback. We love to see that when it happens.
Yeah, come on, stop being silly.
Yeah, don't be silly. This is not a
Give us a
time to
review.
be silly.
I know. God, all the silliness out there.
But yeah, we'll be back to regular format next week, talking some current releases. The guys have seen some films they're excited to talk about. And we'll do that then, I guess. Thank you so much for listening. And especially if you've been along for this Watch 'Em All ride with us. Special kudos to you for hanging in there with us. Welcome to October. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.